What's going on, everybody? It's the Archaic Eagle here today, and I'm back with some more Fallout 76 lore. So, you guys seem to actually really enjoy the last video I'd done, the one about Vault-Tec University, so I decided, you know what? Let's take a look at some other really interesting places in Appalachia in Fallout 76, and just kind of go through their backstory and see where they tie into the whole narrative of Fallout 76. And for today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Sugar Grove, the naval base that is located in the Savage Divide in Fallout 76. Let's get to it. So to start off, kind of like we did in the last video, I want to go over the actual history of Sugar Grove. So Sugar Grove is a military base that is located in Pendelton County, West Virginia. Now, Sugar Grove was originally a satellite station, and at the time, the satellite that was originally built at Sugar Grove was one of the largest satellites in the world. And in 1969, the area was designated as Naval Radio Station Sugar Grove. Now, one thing that's interesting to note here is that Sugar Grove and the adjoining Robert C. Byrd Green Bank Telescope are part of a quiet zone in West Virginia. Basically, what this means is this is an area where radio transmissions are restricted. Only certain things can be put over the airwaves within this area for national security purposes. And the Robert C. Byrd Green Bank Telescope is actually represented in Fallout 76. It's represented as the National Radio Astronomy Research Center. And owing to the fact that Robert C. Byrd is a real person, they chose instead to name it after the collective organization, the National Radio Astronomy Research Organization, as opposed to naming it after Robert C. Byrd. Now, Sugar Grove in real life was actually home to two separate and distinct operations. One was the NSA security operations, and the other one was one called the Naval Information Operations Command, or NAVIOCOM. Now, this part of the operation was actually ceased in 2015, and that part is actually being converted to a Veterans Medical Center. It's going to be a medical center for both active duty service members as well as former active duty service members of the United States military. And Sugar Grove has kind of an interesting and a little creepy back history. The Sugar Grove facility was tabbed as being part of a larger project known as ECHELON, which was a data collections project where different allied countries such as the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, they were all part of a network of data collection to spy on the Soviet Union and its different affiliated satellite states. And what has come out over time is that ECHELON grew beyond this initial purpose, and there were actually instances of these facilities being used to collect communications from private citizens, one such citizen actually being former South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond. Now, even though the NAVIOCOM base has ended its operations, the NSA base continues to perform its operations at the Sugar Grove facility, and to date there are no plans to end those operations. Now, with that being said, the Sugar Grove of Fallout 76 roughly sits in the same geographic location that the real Sugar Grove in Pendelton County sits in, and much like its real-life counterpart, it operates, or in this case operated, as a national security surveillance facility. And in this case, it was still operated by the U.S. Navy and the National Security Administration. And much like the real Sugar Grove, it was under a very, very tight security blanket. Basically, information that went into Sugar Grove didn't often find its way back out. Now, one thing that again ties to the creepy real-life history of Sugar Grove is the fact that the facility was actually used to not only spy on potential enemies of the United States, but also citizens of Appalachia. Basically, anybody who could be considered to be a dissident was observed by the Sugar Grove facility. And one such person was Edward Arnson, a labor union supporter who was actually taken into custody and was further surveilled by Sugar Grove and would ultimately die just a year or so after he was taken into custody. And Arnson's story ties into one of the other really disturbing projects that operated out of the Sugar Grove facility of Fallout 76, and this is Project Somnus. Now, Somnus comes from the Latin word meaning sleep, and the goal of the Somnus project was to create an army of sleeper agents in Appalachia, and one of the people who was tabbed for this project was Edward's son, Martin. Now, the project had limited success. There were some who were able to be properly indoctrinated, brainwashed, if you will, into the project, and were able to complete their functions, but some, sadly, such as the case of Martin Arnson, were not able to really be properly put into the program. Martin was able to complete the tasks assigned to him, but that was the only thing that he would focus on. He would completely disregard anything that was related to his basic well-being for the sake of continuing the mission. Basically, he had no self-preservation whatsoever. Now, Somnus was not the only project that was being operated out of Sugar Grove. Two of the more critical projects at Sugar Grove, and two of the projects that come up a bit in Fallout 76, are Project Siphon and Project Pulsar. Now, Project Siphon was created to be able to infiltrate enemy data systems, scan and locate critical data, and then compress it. And in that regard, the project was a success. However, the chips that were needed to operate the project were operating at a cost of nearly $15 million per chip. So it was determined that the cost of operating this project was going to be much greater than the actual benefit. The other project was Project Pulsar. Now, if you played any of the Mistress of Mysteries side quests, Pulsar and Siphon should sound familiar. That's because in the process of completing this quest line, you actually have to infiltrate Sugar Grove and use the Siphon project to obtain the information from the Pulsar project to create the weapon, the Voice of Set. Now, Pulsar was both a success and a failure. It was a success in the fact that there was useful information about creating electromagnetic weapons, which was the main purpose of Pulsar, but the lead engineer on the project, one Kyle Lockhart, decided that he wanted to speed up the process of gathering the information. So originally, the project would only be able to complete 4 tests on the weapons per day, partially because they would have to reset the weapon and then have a new robot built to test the weapon on. So Kyle Lockhart sets everything to be automated. He sets the gun to be able to be fired on its own once a new robot had been presented, and then allowed for the computers to collect the information on its own and store it. And then Kyle decides to book out for a vacation and comes back a week later, only to find out that he had basically filled the entirety of Sugar Grove's data system with a bunch of information that was mostly junk. And in a panic, Kyle begins to realize that he needs to get this information before a general was due to arrive. And his original plan was to use the Siphon project to scan through all of the data, compress and pull out what he needed, and then get rid of everything else. However, the Great War happened, and this never came to fruition. So Sugar Grove, when you arrive at it, is in somewhat of a state of disrepair. The building itself is mostly intact. However, as you go deeper into the center, you begin to notice that parts of the building are falling apart. Certain wings are no longer accessible, and it's still able to be explored, but not as much as if it were in full operation. However, the robotic guards, the Robo-Brains, the Assaultrons, the Mr. Gutsies, they are still doing their job and will probably do their jobs until the end of time. They're still able to complete their duty, which is to guard the facility. And that becomes a problem if you do the main storyline quest, One of Us, because this mission, again, requires you to go into Sugar Grove and set everything up so that Modus can be reconnected to the external satellite systems and begin to look over Appalachia and see what's going on. But the facility itself is just really interesting in the fact that it's so much rooted in the real life operations of Sugar Grove. It almost shows that the more things change, the more things stay the same. It has a lot of really questionable back history to it as far as observing the entirety of Appalachia. And Project Somnus really has its roots in projects that have unfortunately been attempted by the actual United States government. If you want to find out more about this, I suggest looking up a project referred to as Project MK Ultra, who has had its files for the most part declassified and are able to be viewed. And that brings us to the question of, where does this all fit in? Well, like I said, it shows so much of how, despite the fact that there was such a divergence in the culture, in the society of the Fallout universe versus our own, so much of it still stayed the same. The government still had this quest, this desire to know as much as possible to be able to root out dissidents. And while in modern times this has been tempered mainly through legislation and through the release of these formerly classified documents, in Fallout 76 it almost feels like we've reached Cold War hysteria at its peak. But at the same time, you know, it's still interesting to think about, well, how far did the government in Fallout 76 and in the greater Fallout universe, how far did they go to try and stop the Soviet Union and to stop China from being able to get one up on the United States? And that, to me, is what makes Sugar Grove so interesting. And that's going to do it for this little look into Sugar Grove. Like I said, there are a lot of places in Fallout 76 that are just so interesting to go poke around to find out stuff about. And I've always thought the military installations were really interesting to see how the military both stayed the same and completely diverged from the way that our own modern military is set up. But I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope it's taught you a little bit about the history of the real-life Sugar Grove and of the Sugar Grove of Fallout 76. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, drop a comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, let them know about it. If you guys like these videos, I will most definitely continue to make them. I have a lot of fun making these videos. As always with these videos, I'm going to link the Fallout Wiki down below in the description, so that way you guys can go check out some more of the information about Sugar Grove, read the terminal entries, and I'll also include some links to some articles both about the original purpose of Sugar Grove as well as its current purpose as a veterans medical center. I'm going to go ahead and wrap everything up. I hope you all have enjoyed, and I'll talk to you next time.